And it does come back to the original thing was if you don't have something you're trying to execute, a point you're trying to get across, a theme, whatever it may be, then you're kind of spinning around in the chair and it's like you're not doing anything. So all critique won't matter. But if you have a point that you're trying to illustrate, when someone tells you, I'm not getting that, like, oh, this was supposed to be, oh, he was supposed to be intimidating her in this scene. Oh, I didn't get that at all. I thought he was flirting with her. And then you have to take a step back, and I'm like, oh, I did that wrong. She interpreted that wrong. Now, it's possible that the person really wasn't paying attention, that they were secretly on their phone under the table, or they just don't get what's going on in general. Like you have to objectively, and I hate this, but you have to judge your critique person a
Oh,
little bit
sure.
to kind of gauge where they are as an artist and what their
Yeah.
motives are and decide what takeaways to take from their critique.
I'll
Because
give
there's
you a weird
only,
analogy on
yeah.
that idea too. So there's a style of tarot reading called the Celtic Cross, and in the Celtic Cross, there are 3 cards where their purposes are. You have 2 cards that give you 2 polarities in your question. So like you might have a question of like, and I say this as something I've kind of done. How well will Dogecoin do in 2021? All right, let's say that that's the question.
Woo!
So your first 2 cards that you will draw will be part of that. What are the 2 polarities in the question? So like, what are 2 attributes in the question? So it might be like, okay, you're asking this question because you want to get rich fast, and you also have like resource insecurities. And then there's a 3rd card that you draw later on, and this 3rd card is considered the questioner's viewpoint. So it's basically like, where are you right now internally, mentally, when you're asking this question? Like, what are you thinking? What are you what what's influencing you from outside of yourself, things like that. So I'm saying this as, when you're hearing somebody give you a critique, it is really important to consider what are all the particulars that are influencing them right now, because there are certain critiques where it's like, okay, well, this is, you might be repeating stuff that you've heard from a book you've read, or just like, like a cultural meme or some kind of
Sure.
fixation.
Yeah.
That happens, like that happens where you get feedback and that kind of feedback, unfortunately, can be not very useful. Sometimes it's useful, but not generally. It's not very useful because it doesn't actually help you figure out what it is that you're aiming for, because most artists are not aiming for what the general culture is going for. They're trying to go for what is coming from within their heart, their soul,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yep.
So I think I kind of interrupted though what you were saying, Jal. Did you have somewhere that you were going with that beyond my weird tarot analogy?
What was I talking about? You got to remind me now.
Well, because you were talking, because the whole thing was about how you have to be careful about the
Oh,
perspective of, like, the person who's critiquing you, where they're coming from.
yeah, there's some people and you really. So okay, I'm a screenwriter. Yes, I've won awards. Yes, I've been produced. Yes, I've done this. I've done like a whole slew of credentials that validate my writing and me as a writer. Does that make me better than someone who's never written a script? Yes and no.
Yeah.
So, you know what I'm saying? Like, there are people in my group who have never written a script
Yeah.
and have given me contributions that I've never even thought of. And it was just like, wow, that person just has raw natural talent. And then there's
Oh,
other
yeah.
people who have outdone me in terms of validation and what they've done in that field. And I think everything that they've told me is shit. And it's one of those things where not only am I thinking, is this guy just trying to sabotage me, or is he just so out of touch now with
Yeah.
where everything was, or is he so
Oh,
egotistical that he's
yeah,
trying to
I get
put
what you're
me
saying.
down? Like, it's
Yeah.
just one of those things where you really have to
You
approach
never know where
critique.
good insight's going to come from. You really have
Yeah.
no idea where an insight's going to come from at all.
But one of the big takeaway for me was always, I don't want to lose my voice through the critique. Because like we talked about the internet, you look at it, you put out a movie now, it doesn't matter what movie it is, a giant section of Twitter fucking hates it. And then there's another section of Twitter that vehemently defends it. They're to the point where when there's no movies coming out, they will dig up movies from the past that were considered trash and start going complete contrarian about defending them and saying this was really good actually, and none of that. And you're like, what the?
That's happening with the Star Wars prequels right now, where it's like suddenly it's some kind of masterpiece criticism of capitalism or something. Like, okay, well, whatever.
And so the thing is like when you put art up for judgment, there's always going to be a back and forth about whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether they like it, whether they don't, how to fix it, what to keep, yada yada yada. And I think the biggest takeaway for me has always been, what am I trying to say? How am I trying to say it? And I have to ask myself those questions. And it's when I can't answer them that I offer it up to critique. So when I bring a script, I bring it and I'm coming loaded with questions. I don't usually have them read the script and the table read and then say, okay, what's everybody's thoughts? Because that's not what I'm looking for. What I'll get to is, did you get that this guy was trying to rape her? Like he was trying to get her in a position where she was alone with him? Like I'm asking specific questions to my audience, and then they'll tell me, yeah, I got that, or no, I didn't get that. And I'm going in as the artist looking for feedback on specific things and not general approval of my art. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
The takeaway that I'm asking from you is, how do you approach critique when you bring something to someone for critique, especially now, because you don't really do critique with Trailer Park Warlock, I assume. You do what you want, you put it out there, but do you evaluate like comment threads after the fact and see if they were picking up on what?
That's my critique. Like, those are where I find my critiques now. And sometimes they're valuable and sometimes they're not as valuable. Like and there have been a couple of times where I have read something and gone, okay, that tells me a lot about whether or not I'm communicating properly what I'm trying to say. And I've definitely done some episodes where I am being willfully like obscure and trying to be confusing for narrative purposes. And there are times when, I've gotten critiques where it's like, I don't understand what's going on. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm succeeding in that. And what I want to see is a confirmation of whether or not I have readers go through the process of not understanding what's going on and then coming to. So great example, season 2, I have this, I'd say it's about 10 episodes or so where everything is thrown up in the air, and I willingly made this narrative where you don't know like where people are in certain like times and like in history, and everything is made such that you're supposed to piece it together till you get to a point where everything's revealed, and suddenly when you look back at all the events that happen, they all make sense. So that was hard for me to read the comments for a while, because it was people going like, this is ridiculous, this doesn't make sense, I don't understand what you're doing. And then finally getting to that episode where the big revelation happens and seeing the comments that are like, it all suddenly makes sense now. Oh my God, I can't believe what you did. Like, that's really validating, right? And so it was for me, it was challenging to go through that process of critique, because I'm like, so long as I land this, so long as I land this, none of this matters.